today we built a carport. I got another one of these.
Okay, stop the video. Did you hear that? Here, let me play it for you again. You want to know what that is? That is the auto leveler function of the camera. And that tone is brand new. That is something the camera decided to update us on after our camera software updated in the background like it's kind of supposed to. So throughout this whole video, you hear that sound. Bing, 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 literally 20, 30, 40 times a minute. So rather than subject you to that torture, I'm going to voice over this whole video. We had a few months back acquired on clearance a Shelter Logic Max Canopy AP shelter system to create a temporary carport. Now at one point in time, these things were built fairly sturdy. However, as companies change hands and as products get reintroduced into their third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth generations, quality starts to go downhill. The Shelter Logic Canopy AP system is no different. Before, when it used to be braced fairly sturdy, now it's fairly flimsy, something that Carl was discovering as we were opening up this box. I guess that's why it was on clearance. However, he had some fairly interesting ideas on how to sturdy up the whole system. To start with, we laid all the pieces out on the ground and ensured that everything that was supposed to be in the box was in the box. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. There is a solution for that, but that'll come later. After laying all the pieces out and identifying what is what, we got to work. Well, he got to work, I held the camera. Assembling one end of the canopy and then working our way down, as you can see here. Now, the way things were laid out in our box, some of these things had numbers written on them in Sharpie, some of the poles did not. Some of the poles had divots in them, some of the poles did not, yet they all seem to be labeled for the exact same thing. So if you're dealing with one of these canopy solutions for a temporary garage, be aware that not everything comes labeled. Also be aware that you may have to come up with a creative solution for a missing bungee cord or two. One of the things Crazy Carl pointed out in this video is that his parents are still using one of these temporary garages 24 years later. They had to replace the tarp over it, of course, but they're still using the same temporary garage. This particular model, since it's not designed as sturdy as that one, he expects to get about 5 years of use out of it. He recommended to about a couple times a year go out and check it, make sure there's nothing hanging on it, that you don't have any dead leaves or any dead weight in the center of it to make sure the tarp lasts that long. Otherwise, you'll get a bunch of weight and it's going to eventually tear a hole in it. Now, if you are trying to do this alone, make sure you got everything situated exactly where you want it before you set it up, because it does take about 2 to 3 people to actually maneuver and move this around. And you don't really want to drag it around by yourself because you could warp or break some of the poles. Next comes the laying out of the tarp. Now, this tarp material is pretty flimsy and thin, but if you maintain it, knock off the leaves and the snow and things, it should last a little bit longer. Going simply from one side to the other, stretching it over to make sure everything covers everything before you put the legs up and lift it up. One of the things that Carl mentioned is that this material, they expect you to support the tarp top with only the legs. And what he tends to do is weave between one side and then the other extra cordage to support and make the tarp top a little bit stronger and sturdier. And I know it's just a tarp, not a tarp top, but I like saying the words tarp top together. So while Crazy Carl was getting ready to do the tie downs on the tarp, which is technically the next step after laying the tarp out, Kit was discovering that on the 2007 Yaris we got, it doesn't require anything to hold the hood up due to some minor accidental body modifications, we'll call them. And I discovered that my finger was in the shot about 30 seconds into recording. The next step in assembling this was taking the rope and measuring it out into 4 equal pieces of about 3 meters apiece, or 10 feet, whichever works for you. While Crazy Carl was measuring this out to the best of his own guesstimation, Kit was playing with the Yaris. He was actually trying to push out some of the dents that was in the side panels to allow the door to open easier and to allow the hood to close smoother. Temporarily, our project got interrupted while Crazy Carl assisted Kit with his door dent project. Now, here you can see he's just using some cloth and one of the tools there to just pull the dent out real quick, which actually did work. If you'll notice that we got a nice even line going all the way down. And yes, I know my finger was in that shot too. So for those who are on the finger count, that is now 2. After the Yaris interruption, Crazy Carl decided to lift the tarp up before doing the next step, which officially is to attach the elastic and stretch the tarp over the whole roof. This way he can do that last part in the air, which is easier for him and probably easier for you. Now, he did stretch the whole tarp over the top centerpiece first, otherwise you would need a ladder to finish that. Now, the canopy was raised on one side than the other. The legs were inserted, and I'm glad I caught that on camera. And we made sure to push in from the ends so that didn't happen. And then we raised the other side. So the official next step is to actually tie the canopy down to the sides so that the tarp top can actually stay in one place. And tarp top is probably my new favorite word. Now the next official step is to actually take the ropes that's on the corners of the tarp top and wrap it around the pole and insert them into the spot in the hole with the hook, like so. And then the elastic is going to go through the rings that runs up the sides of the tarp top. Here we see Crazy Carl actually going to do each corner before he does the elastic, and then he starts doing his pole weaving magic that he talked about earlier, and the phone dinged through, so I voiced over it. Here we see Crazy Carl actually putting some of the elastic up. Now he's not doing all of the elastic yet. He's doing 1 or 2 per section to hold the tarp up, and then next he's going to get a ladder and weave the poles together using some rope. And we'll show you exactly that step here coming up. Now, as you can see, the rope is tied on one side and wrapped around the middle pole, then tied on the other side. This is to do a couple of things. Number 1, it does hold the ends together more securely. Number 2, it provides some support structure for the tarp top so that if it gets a few leaves or things on it, it doesn't sag nearly as bad. And this will give it some support structure. It'll give it some means to last a bit longer than, say, a season or 2 before it begins to pull apart and fall apart and collapse on you. This will help make it more permanent as opposed to being just a 1 or 2 week thing that you stick up and then put away again. And of course, ends are tightened down. Besides getting my thumb in the shot for your finger counters, that's number 3, we have our elastic done up and we've got our rope here. The rope is just standard outdoor rope. You can get at Dollar General, for example, for about $5 for 50 feet, nothing special there. And the other additional equipment is tent stakes that we had, some old tent stakes laying around, and a zip tie for that one since we're missing an elastic strap. And that's it for the additional equipment. And this project was actually a first for Crazy Carl because we had to tie the legs together. I've never seen a temporary shelter like this that required you to tie the legs together, but apparently this one did. And we're just not going to ask questions on exactly where Carl learned how to tie knots like that. And we did show off our solution for the missing bungee cord. Also, for those of you on finger count, yeah, that's number 4. Now we've exhausted the actual supplies that was included with the Shelter Logic box, and we're not really thrilled with this company. We've got weights on top of the legs, and you see how well they work. We have pins in the 4 corners, but they didn't include pins for the middle, so Crazy Carl got a couple of aluminum shelter nails and stuck them in the legs there, as well as some old tent stakes. Now, ideally those tent stakes would be marked off at a 45-degree angle on the outside of the 4 legs. However, that's not an option for us here. So what he's doing is he's setting one dead center between each of the sections here and tying off a rope from one corner to the other. And when you're hammering in your stakes, make sure you hammer them in at an angle so that they can hold better. So here we're tying it from one pole down to the stake in the center, looping it through that, and then tying it to the other pole. And here we got the final product. This all took us about one afternoon to accomplish, so to speak. And that's with a minor interruption of a Yaris project getting in the way. Now there was 3 of us working on this, with Carl doing the brunt of the work and me doing the brunt of the holding of the camera and holding of legs and things. But you may need 2 to 3 people to accomplish this all on your own. As you can tell, we've included 4 of our own stakes, several lengths of our own rope. We have also included of our own devices here 2 nails to hold down the center legs, because if you've got wind gusts like Midwestern winds, the center is going to want to be held down. Otherwise, that's where you're going to get a lot of your wear and tear in the shelter. Here we see Carl improvising a weight for some of the stakes to make sure that they hold down as well. But all in all, that's it. We're not thrilled with the product itself, but we are thrilled with our accomplishment here. It is a nice looking shelter for fairly cheap since we got it on clearance last year. Now, your mileage may actually vary. Maybe you got a better shelter material from a different company or the same company, who knows. But ours, we did have to brace it a little bit. We did have to do a couple little things that was not in the instructions to make it hold better and to last longer. But this is something that's going to be around for quite a long time. As long as we get out here every month or 2, knock some leaves off of the top of it, make sure no holes are being worn in it, that sort of thing, it will hold up for years to come. Who knows, maybe that plastic material will hold longer than 5 years, maybe it'll hold 8 or 10 years. But some of these things you just got to do that with. You got to rig it with things that the company did not include to make them hold better and last longer. Because, sad to say, these companies design these things to fail after a certain amount of time, so you're forced into buying another product. Planned obsolescence indeed. But that's about it from us. Thank you very much for hanging out with us, and thank you for listening to my voice drone on about this. And if you did enjoy this, please give it a like. If you're not a fan of this style, don't worry. This is a one-off thing thanks to a certain camera update constantly dinging through the whole video. And normally you hear a lot more of Carl than you do of me. Y'all have a good one, and hope to see you in the next one.